What's up everyone, and thank you for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pumpkin in Blender. Seeing as though Halloween is on the way, thought it would be an appropriate video. So let's hop over into Blender and get started. So first thing, let's go ahead and delete this cube by selecting it and pressing X, click on delete. Now the next thing you want to do is go object or add mesh. We're going to add a UV sphere, and that's going to be the base for our pumpkin. First thing I want to do before I start modeling my pumpkin is I want to set up my camera. I'm going to click on my camera, enter camera view, and then what I like to do is go down to view and then click lock camera to view. And now if I drag around with the mouse, with the middle mouse button, I can move my camera into whatever position I think looks good for this pumpkin video. So I'm gonna set it to that position and then unclick that. And now if I move around, it's gonna exit that view. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's start modeling our pumpkin. Select our sphere. We want to right click, say shade smooth, just to take away those hard edges. And to add some extra smoothness, we want to go down to modifier properties, add a modifier, and add a subdivision surface modifier. On render, we're going to leave it on 2 and on viewport on 1. You select your sphere. I'm going to go into edit mode, and now what we're going to do is say scale by pressing S, and I want to scale it on the Z axis. So press Z and then just move the mouse downwards, and that's going to squash it in a bit, right? Because pumpkins are a little bit deformed in that way. So in a left click, we're happy with that position. Before we continue, let's just go ahead and save our project file in case everything crashes. Call it pumpkin. All right. Do not forget to save your project files. I would suggest doing it at an early stage of your project so that you can just hit Control S every few minutes, because you never know when Blender will stop working and you do not want to lose your work. So now we've got our sphere. We're going to go back into edit mode here, and we want to give the sphere that distinctive pumpkin look, right? Which is the bulges, those vertical bulges. That's what we want. So I'm gonna go to my edge selection mode. I'm gonna select an edge, go to the top view. Actually, let's click here on the top view set. You can move your viewport around by holding shift and pressing middle mouse button, and then you can pan around like this. Now, what we're going to do is I want to select these line segments, and we want to skip a few and then select, skip a few, select, so that we offset a few times, right? So we're going to select these and maybe these ones. I'm just crossing over, as you can see. And now that we've selected those edges, those line edges, you want to go up here to select and click on select loops and edge loops. And what that's going to do is automatically follow the selection all the way around. And then all we need to do now is press S for scale, and we're going to scale it downward. And that is going to give us our very distinct pumpkin shape. Now let's go back to object mode. And already we have something resembling a pumpkin, which is pretty cool. It looks very natural. Now, obviously, we have still a few steps to go. We need to add the pumpkin stem, and we need to cut out the eyes and the mouth. Now, let's continue by adding the stem. So what I'm going to do is I will add another object. So I'm going to add mesh, and we're going to add a cylinder. Just move this up out of the way by pressing G, and we move it on the Z axis by pressing Z. Left click to place, and then scale it down by pressing S on the keyboard and moving your mouse inward. Now that's still a little thick, but we want to add some length to this before we scale it down even more. So you want to go to make sure that object is selected, go to edit mode, scale by pressing S, and Z to scale on the Z axis. Left click to confirm, and we want to scale it down because it's still a little bit too large, right? So we're going to press S, move inward, and I'm happy with that size. Now, before we can shape this, we need to cut in some horizontal segments. So we're going to go to side view, zoom in, and you can see, all right. Now, a pumpkin stem, or most stems, obviously they're thinner at the bottom and then they thicken out as you go up to the top. So you can go to plane selection, and we can select the bottom part and just press S, scale inward, and that's going to give us a nice shape. Now we're going to go over to our loop cut button or function, and we're going to add a few cuts in here and shift them around to add a nice curve to this. So first one, we'll cut in the center by left clicking. You're going to press G to move, and you're going to just move your mouse to the side. And we're going to do this a few times. Left click, press G to move, left click, G to move, and that looks pretty good. Let's add just a few extra cuts in between by just left clicking, go to object mode. So now we have something resembling a stem. We just want to left click, say shade smooth. Now, obviously the shading looks a little off. So what you can do to fix that, on hard edges, you want to go down here to your normals tab or your object properties, normals. Make sure your object is selected, and then click on auto smooth, and that's going to smooth it out even more. Now obviously you can see that it looks a bit jaggedy still. To get around that, you can add a subdivision surface modifier. Once again, select your object, go to modifiers, add modifier, subdivision surface modifier, and we can add an extra one here, 2. Now as you can see, we have a strange, let's actually add even more, so 3. So there's a little bit of issue. This looks strange here, so you can just go back into edit mode, and all we need to do is add in an extra loop cut. So what I like to do here is go to selection, go to planar select the top plane, and then press E to extrude, and then S to scale. And we're just going to scale it in, and again E for extrude, S for scale, move it inward, left click, and then when you go back to object mode, you'll see it's a lot smoother, and that looks a lot better. Now we've got our stem, we need to move it into place. Go to your side view, press G on the keyboard for move and Z because we want to move it on the Z axis, and move it downwards so it looks like it is connected to the pumpkin. So we can move it down even more by pressing G, Z, move it down, and that looks pretty good. I am quite happy with that. We go to our camera view now, and this is what we have so far, right? So we've got a basic pumpkin here. Now what we want to do is add in our eyes and our mouth for our pumpkin. Now the simplest way I can suggest to do this is, I think, let's duplicate this object and hide it so we always have a backup to revert back to if we made any mistakes and we want to go back to this version. It's always good to have a backup. So you're going to press Shift D to duplicate, right? And then you can press Escape so it'll remain in the same place. And now you can see that it duplicated the sphere, and we're going to hide the second one on the viewport and the render. Go back to your original one, selected. Now we're going to make some edits here. I want to apply this subdivision surface modifier. So we're going to go here to apply, and then go to edit. And now we're going to use the knife tool to cut in some eyes and a mouth. All right, so now you're free to experiment and cut out your own shapes. I'm just going to do some very basic shapes here. So anywhere here, I'm just going to left click, and you will see it will snap automatically to your vertices. Let's do some sort of eye shape. Click there. Maybe click, I don't know, somewhere over here. And somewhere back over there. And connect it back and then press enter. And now we've added a cut right through here. We're going to do the same on the other side. Left click, somewhere down here, left click, and all the way back to the beginning, and then press enter. So we've got two eyes, and now we need to cut out a mouth shape. So we're going to left click, and I'm just going to follow a very rough zigzag pattern for the teeth. Doesn't have to be perfect. Something like that. Then all the way down here, and just follow that pattern backward till we get all the way back to the beginning. Click here, maybe over here, and maybe there, and then back there and up there. See, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Press enter, and now we've added these cuts. Now what we need to do is remove these faces. We're going to zoom in here, go to your selection box. I'm going to go to my circle, select circle, and then when you left click and hold, you can drag and select the faces that you want to delete. So let's make sure we select them. Be sure not to go over, because then it's going to select the ones you don't want, right? So you don't want to do that. And now we're going to do the same on the other side by holding shift. It's going to keep on adding. If you don't hold shift, it's going to do that, and you're going to have to start all over again. So we can undo by pressing Control Z. Make sure to hold shift so we can add. Just left click and drag, select those ones, go over here, shift, left click, drag, select all these very quickly. I love this tool. It's a lot easier to go and make some selections by just painting where you want to select. Now, if you did accidentally select some boxes you don't want, just release everything and hold Control, and then left click on the ones you don't want. So it will deselect those faces, right? So perfect. Now we want to delete these faces. You're going to press X on the keyboard and say delete faces. Make sure you click on faces. Let's go back to our object mode. Control S just to save. And look at this. All right, so now we have a basic scary pumpkin. But as you can see, our pumpkin is very paper thin, so we want to add some thickness to that. So what we can do, a very quick and easy way, is to select your pumpkin and go to modifiers, and we want to go to solidify. Right, now make sure you're going to see some issues here, right, with your mesh. So make sure to go down to normals on your modifier and just say high quality. And then also make sure to go down to properties, normals, auto smooth. All right. Perfect. And now we can go back to modifiers and we can add thickness by left clicking and just moving the slider. We just want to add a bit of thickness, and that is looking pretty good. Go back to camera, Control S. Now there's our pumpkin. Looks nice. Now obviously we want to add some textures and some lighting and render this out to make it look really nice. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. If you want to take this viewport away, or this property setting bar here on the side, just press N on your keyboard and it will disappear. And if you press N again, it will come back. So let's add some lighting and textures. So I like to work in cycles because it gives you the most realistic renders. EV will give you a game render vibe, right? So we don't want that. We want to change here, go back to our render properties and go down to cycles. And we want to change our render device to a GPU. So we want to use our graphics card. And now we can, before we add the lighting, let's add some textures. So we're going to add very, very basic textures to our pumpkin, right? So we're going to select our pumpkin. First, before I add some textures, I just want to make it a little bit more smooth because I can see it's not the smoothest pumpkin. So we're going to go to modifiers, add subdivision surface modifier, right? And move the solidify underneath that. All right, cool. So we've got a smoother pumpkin here. I like that a lot better. Now go back to camera. We're going to select our pumpkin and we're going to go to our material properties. Add a new material. Now, at this point, we are in the basic viewport shading view. So we won't be able to see any textures as we place them. So you want to change to your viewport shading. So you can see your basic materials, right? So currently there are no materials applied, so it will just look plain white. Now we've added a material by going to Object Materials, New, and we want to change our base color and drag it down to orange, nice pumpkin orange, which is something like that. Will work fine. And then we won't play with the other settings for now. Let's just get our base colors. We want to do the same for our stem. Select your stem, go to material properties, new material, base color, drag that to green. Now I want a darker green. This is a very lime green. So you can drag this slider down to make dark a nice dark green, something like that. All right, make sure you save. And now what we can do is when you start a new Blender project, it gives you very basic lighting, adds one single light source there. So let's see what that looks like in render view. So if I click up here on rendered view, it's going to do a very basic render. And that's what that looks like. But we want to make it look a little bit better than this, a little bit more spooky. All right, so the first thing you want to do is we want to go to our world properties, and we want to drag this strength of your world lighting down to 0 to make it nice and dark. And then we can start experimenting with lighting. So let's add a light source inside of our pumpkin. So by holding Shift and pressing A, it'll bring up this menu, and you can go down to light. We're going to add a point light. And because my origin point is in the center there, it will automatically insert or spawn in the light inside of my pumpkin already. Now that looks pretty cool right off the bat. But what we want is we probably want some basic reflections, light reflections on the surface here. Now currently we do not have any plane or surface in our scene, so we need to add that in. So let's just go back here to viewport shading so we can see what we're doing. Or what I actually like to do is work with two kind of views, a rendered view and a basic viewport shading view. So you can split your view by hovering your mouse in the top left corner here. You want to left click and you want to drag to the right to split your views. Then you've got a camera view, and then you can move around and work in this view. So on this side, hover your mouse there, press Z on the keyboard, and we want to left click on rendered view. And that'll give us a view that the camera provides. Like this is what we are seeing through the lens of the camera. Our final render basically. Now on this side, let's add in a plane by pressing Shift A. Open our menu, go to Mesh Plane, and we want to scale the plane by pressing S. Move your mouse outward, give it a nice surface area. Left click to place, and then G because we want to move it, and Z because we want to move it on the Z axis. Move it downward, so just touches our pumpkin. And now you can see we have some reflections here, which is pretty cool. Now what I want to do is add a black surface so you can only see the reflections of the pumpkin and nothing else, right? So let's go select our plane and go to material properties, add a new material. We're going to make this base color all the way down to black, and then we're going to move our metallic slider all the way up, and then we want to bring our roughness slider down, and that will increase our reflections. You see, so adjusting the roughness, the less rough a surface of an object is, the more reflective it will be, and the higher up it goes, the value, the less reflective it will become. So we want to move it nice and low all the way down here so we can see some reflections of our pumpkin. All right, now let's try and find a way to hide this light source, right? So we want to select our light. You can go up here and left click on your light. Make sure you select the correct light because that's the point light up there. We want to select the light that's inside the pumpkin. Press G and Z to move on the Z axis, and we just want to move it upwards so it's hidden in the reflection. And we can actually now go in and play with this light and increase the strength by increasing the power. Make sure that once you've selected your light, you go to your object data properties for your light and go to power, left click and move the slider upward, and we're going to increase the brightness. Now we don't want it to be too bright. And then we can also change the color to a little bit of a yellowish tint, right? Because if, let's say you're going to place a candle in there, you want some yellow. Very, very cool. Now we can play with the lighting a little bit more. So now we can select this light and we can go to move, and we can move it around in the scene until we are happy with the lighting. So we can place it on the side here. We can move it back even more to give some sort of rim light, which is very cool. So let's do that, right? So more up and more in. All right, and that's going to give us a nice rim light there. I want to change the color of this light to a spooky blue. Give it a bit of a blue. Right, and then we'll counter that with the red or the orange lighting inside, which will give it nice color contrast. Now let's duplicate this light by pressing Shift D and enter, and we can move this light to the other side to add rim lighting on the opposite side. Very cool. We can even move it more up or down. It's really up to you. You can play around until you find something that you prefer or you like. Something like that. And then I want to add one more light. So Shift D for duplicate, press enter, and we're going to move it forward to the front here. All right. And then I want to move it up a bit. And I want it to be very, very subtle lighting. So this is way too harsh. So I want to increase the radius of my light. And then I want to bring down the strength all the way down, because you just want a very subtle light hitting the front of this pumpkin, so you can see a little bit of detail. And we're going to change the front light to an orange light or a yellow light. All right, very nice. Now let's, just for fun, let's go ahead and render this and see what we have. So I want to go to my render tab, and I'm going to change my, now obviously I am using Blender 2.9, so some of these settings might be slightly different. The interface might be slightly different on the newer versions of Blender. Always make sure you're using the newest version. I still need to update. So I'm going to change my max samples down to 500. On denoise, I'm going to change my denoiser to optics denoise. I want to go change my light path. I'm going to use fast GI approximation. All right, and now actually I'm not going to use this. I'm not going to use that. So yeah. So render samples 500, denoise optics. Then we're going to go to our resolution size and leave this on 1920 by 1080, which is standard HD resolution. And we're going to render the single frame by pressing F12 on the keyboard, or you can go up here to render and render image. So press F12 and we're going to render this out and see what we have so far. Yeah, and there we go. That is our very, very basic pumpkin, right? Now, we can make this a little bit cooler. You want to minimize this screen and go to our compositing tab. Click on Use Nodes. We want to press Shift A, click Search, type in Viewer, and place that. We want to connect our image into our viewer so we can see our image here, our render. And then we want to just add some very basic glow. So you just want to hold Shift, press A, left click on Search, and then we want to type in glare. Click on glare, drop it on there, and also connect it to your composite output. And we want to change from streaks to fog glow. Okay, and then our threshold, we want to bring down to be a low value. And we want to change from medium to high. And I think what we can do is go back and just again increase the power of our light inside of our pumpkin. So make sure you select your light inside of your pumpkin. Go to lighting and increase the light strength, and then render again. Cool, yeah. Go back to compositing. We can duplicate the glare by left clicking on it and pressing Shift D and drop in another glare, and that will intensify, but we can change this one to maybe a streak. So it'll give some streaks, add some streaks. So you can play around with this obviously as much as you want. I think I'm just going to leave it on one single glare as is. Maybe just bring up the threshold just a little bit. And then go back to layouts. What you can do is you can change your color management down here. Go to render, color management, and you can change from filmic to standard. And that will make your colors a little bit more vibrant and contrasty. Now, obviously, you could play around with this however you want. You can change and amend and add real textures. But the point of this video was just to show you how to make a very, very basic pumpkin model with some basic lighting. And then you can also go and change to Eevee and see what that looks like, right? So let's join these areas by right-clicking on that line and join on to the right. And in Eevee, you can do some cool things. You can add some ambient occlusions, some bloom, depth of fields, screen space reflections. You can really play around with all of these settings. Change to high contrast render, and you can render that. Yeah, really play around with it. It's a lot of fun. Let's just move that light out of the view. And yeah, just play around with it, guys. Just have fun. It's all about having fun. Because if you're not having fun, you're not going to enjoy the process of creation or creating these 3D objects. Either way, there's your pumpkin. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like it and you found it informative, you learned something, or you just enjoyed watching it, then please consider pressing the like button on the video. That would help me out tremendously and I would appreciate you. And if you find yourself coming back to my channel and watching more videos every now and then maybe consider subscribing. It's free and it will genuinely help me out so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching this video.